Hi, everybody. It's Christina, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. Welcome to day 3 of the Beltane Bash. Hi, Pamela. Good to see you. Hi, Susan. Good to see you. Some familiar faces. I hope to see some new faces today. Could anybody let me know in the comment section? Can you hear and see me okay? Let me know. Sound check. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about the fairies, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think I could sit and talk about fairies for hours and hours and hours. I've been involved in the fairy realm since I was just a wee little child. It has a very special place in my heart. Okay, sound is good. You can see me. Hi, Tanya. Good to see you guys. Hi, Kim. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Everybody go and just get comfortable. Let everybody come on in. You know, Facebook always wants to take like an extra minute to let the world know that we're live. But I guess, while we're waiting, I could go ahead and introduce myself. So I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Christina, and I'm a psychic business coach. And I really specialize in teaching tarot readers how to make money with tarot cards. I'm also an advanced psychic development facilitator, and I run what you probably know me from. Probably the most popular thing that people know me from is the Make Tarot Your Business mentorship program. I've been running that for about 4 years now, and my specialty is just teaching people how to market themselves, especially on social media, business strategy, and that sort of thing. Really, how to get visible online. And I just want to take a moment to thank our boss witch, Susie, for hosting this event for us. And she has put so much hard work and dedication into this event. And I know that I've personally been enjoying like all of the workshops that's been going on. I've been watching them and thoroughly enjoying everybody's presentations. And the best part is that, we're like barely halfway done. So we have a couple more days of really awesome stuff to watch. A lot of really cool workshops are going to be coming up, and everybody else's workshops are a hard act to follow. So I'm going to try really hard to give you guys something awesome today. And I just want to know, let me know in the comments below, do you work with the fairies? Are the fairies like a big part of your magical, metaphysical, witchy practice? Or is this kind of like a new concept for you? Or maybe you've just been kind of curious about working with the fairies and you're just not really sure where to start. So let me know kind of where you're at with that so I can kind of gauge everybody's level of understanding and like what they kind of want from this workshop, because I really want to make this personalized just for you guys. Good to see you guys. Hi, Madam Z, Susie. Hi, Rebecca. Good to see you, Victoria, Kimberly. Kristen's here. Good to see you guys. So today's workshop is actually part 2 of a series. And after our workshop today, I'm going to put a link in the comment below where you can actually access part 1. And when I did part 1, it's kind of like more of like an general introduction to the fairies. In that workshop, I answer questions like, who and what are the fae? Do the fairies really exist? Are fairies good? Are they evil? Are they angels? Like, what the heck are they? What do fairies look like? Should we work with fairies? Are fairies dangerous? So, some of those beginner kind of questions I've already answered in a video. And when you guys sign up to get the bonus gifts that I have for you today, you'll be able to access that video. So you'll have like I think it was like an hour or 2 long. So I'm thinking today is probably going to go for an hour and a half maybe. So you'll have a really good introductory kind of course on how to work with the fairies. And I also have a PDF handout, so you guys will get that more towards the end. It's going to contain, a good portion of what we talk about today, but it's also going to contain some other things as well. There's a Beltane spread that I have for you guys as a free gift that you can use with your tarot or oracles. There's also a spread that is all about connecting and channeling high vibe beings. So you can use this to actually talk to the fae and get information from the fairies, but you can actually use it universally. I mean, you can use it to talk to angels, you can use it to talk to aliens, you can use it to talk to ancestors, you can pretty much use it to talk to anybody. So today's workshop is going to be broken down into three main parts, all right? So the first part of this discussion, I'm going to actually talk about how to make allies. So like, what are some things that you can do to even bring the fairies onto your property, to bring them into your life, to bring them into your home? And that's going to be the majority, the bulk of what we're going to talk about today. The next thing I'm going to talk about is, okay, so after you become allies with them, then what? Like, how do we actually communicate with them? How do we determine what kind of fairy they are? And like, how can we actually connect with them and make it more of a tangible thing, right? Other than just knowing that the fairies are around. And then finally, the last part of this workshop, we'll discuss some of the more like magical, witchy woo-woo ways that you can bring the fairies into your home and encourage what we call a fairy house spirit, which is basically a protective guardian of your home. Okay. So Kim says she's never worked, curious to work with them. Rebecca says never worked with them, but they are around me and my dog sees and feels them. Susie says, I know about fairies, but I don't work with them on a regular basis. I have a house and do offerings. Victoria says, I wanted to work with the fairies, but need to know how. Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about that today. Tanya says, I get pulled by decks with fairies. Crystal Vision says, my favorite. I love the Crystal Visions tarot deck. It is so pretty. Kimberly says, is it weird that fairies, aliens are all kind of interchangeable for me? Except for leprechauns. I once met someone deep into story involved with leprechaun. I realized I would block there. Well, I actually talk about that in my other videos. So Kimberly, I'm not sure if you've seen that yet, but I actually talk about like it is pretty much all the same thing, but the thing that makes it different, that this like is the definitive distinction between those separate entities, is basically cultural bias, religious bias. That's pretty much all it is. In my opinion, fairies are angels, they are aliens, they are all of these other things. They are the unknown, the unknowable spirits. Many cultures have different names for these things, and they've attached kind of like their own bias to them. And I talk more about that actually in the previous video, that the part 1 that goes with this. So I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to that one. But yeah, for sure, I 100% agree with you that there are lots and lots of names. They're even in the Hindus call them devas. I mean, there's a lot of different names for fairies, but today mostly we're going to focus on the Celtic version of the fairy, because we are celebrating Beltane, which is a Gaelic Celtic fire holiday, fire festival. So in the theme, in the spirit of Beltane, we're going to kind of put a little bit more of a Celtic kind of Gaelic kind of edge on it. But yeah, agree. Ellen says, I do give offerings to fairies and put some out some hawthorn. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Kimberly says, I must have missed in that part. What you describe is in line with what I'm feeling. Yeah, and you know, that's your universalist kind of coming out. And I am the same way as well. Okay, so I want to kind of backtrack very briefly on something I kind of touched about in the previous video. I won't go into it too much because you can go back and watch that one. But the main question that people have is, can anybody work with the fairies? And are the fairies inherently good? The answer is that anybody can work with the fairies if they want to, and they're willing to put in the work to work with the fairies. The fairies are very judgmental beings, meaning that it's not like a god or a goddess where they're kind of always there and you can kind of petition them and things like that. Fairies are more, they're not like angels. Like, one of the things I described in the previous video was that angels don't have free will, whereas fairies do have free will. They are not obliged to be support for humans. They are not obliged or expected to do anything for humans at all. And that's the main difference between the cultural perception of an angel and the cultural perception of a fairy. The fairy are very much their own individual beings with their own wants and desires. And as long as someone is willing to put in the work and do the right things, they can definitely work with the fairies. But the truth is that the fairies are not inherently good. There are fairies that are, I wouldn't say that fairies are evil, and I wouldn't say that they're good. They're actually neither of that. They are judges. They will judge you based on your behavior. They will judge you, based on your spirit, on your soul. And if you are a bad or negative person, or you do things to harm the planet and things like that, or you're a really wasteful person, they will judge you negatively, and they can elicit some mischievous kind of prankster kind of energy in your life. I actually talk about in the previous video an experience I had with a fairy who got mad at me and what happened with that. So if that is intriguing for you to listen to, go back and watch that video. But the reality is that fairies are not required to be kind or to be nice to you. Does that mean that they're just out there causing mayhem and mischief to everybody just because? No, I don't really believe that that's the case either. I believe it wholly depends on the individual person that is petitioning them, that is, in their vicinity. And anywhere that you have wildlife, there's going to be some type of fairy around. So does that basically what I'm trying to say is that if you live more in like a woodland area, you're going to have an abundance of fairies. If you live in a big city where there's not a lot of gardens and things like that, there's going to be a very limited supply of fairies. So number one, how to make allies, you need to be involved in some natural kind of wildlife landscape to be able to really connect with them. And if that isn't like around you, you're going to have to seek that out for yourself. Fairies are typically not going to be around unless there's some reason for them to be around. And each type of fairy, based on the element, has its own sort of like responsibilities and what like their projective is in terms of like what they really want to accomplish, like their primal doctrines and their primal sort of programming. And I talk more about that in the previous video too. But the way that you want to actually make allies with the fairies, first and foremost, beyond, fairy door, which is very cliche, we'll talk about that at the end, or, getting statues of fairies or building a fairy altar and things like that, or outside of just making offerings. The number one way that you're going to make allies with the fairy kingdom is through conservation and through environmental awareness. And as witches, that really sings to our heart because we are natural folks. We, work with the herbs, we work with medicines, we work with the elements. That is like home to us, I rarely meet witches that are not at least a little bit concerned about climate change, at least not, a little bit concerned about the oceans, plastics, recycling and things like that. So conservation, first and foremost, is going to be the way to win the fairies' hearts. If you can win the fairies' hearts, and if you can prove to the fae that you are in fact a good person who is here to help the earth, they will bless you. What you will find is that, especially if you own some property, what you'll find is that your gardens will grow better. You'll have less, like natural disasters on your property. You'll just find money, like money will just come to you. Basically, your area where you live will become very abundant, and it will become like that very Nine of Pentacles and tarot kind of energy, where the lady's in the garden and everything is really nice and everything just seems to kind of work out. The fae do have the ability to bless you with the shine, or it's, like some sort of like luck where things just kind of work out for you all the time. I've been working with the fairy like really hardcore since I moved into my personal property. I tried previously, but it was really hard, like in apartments and things like that, and working full time. So it's kind of like one of those things where it has to be kind of like the right time, the right space to really get the full blessing of the fairy. But it's not about being perfect. It's not about doing everything right all the time. I am certainly not a perfect person. I definitely do make mistakes when it comes to the environment, and there are certain things that maybe I could be better about. But the truth is that it really is about you trying. If you're at least putting the intention and the effort forth, you're going to start creating some sort of kinship, some sort of relationship with them. And obviously, the better you are about conservation, the more blessings that you will receive. And for the next part of this workshop, I want to talk about some things that I have done on my personal property, some things that you can kind of consider that if you have some property that you want to do or, set this all up on, even if you don't, there's still places likely around you. Like there's botanical gardens that you can, volunteer at. There's so many different ways that you can go about really conserving the earth and giving back to the earth, and at least trying to reduce your carbon footprint. That there's really no excuse. Everybody can really participate in this. Obviously, if you have your own land and property, you're going to be able to do a lot more, which is one of the benefits of actually owning some property, right? Marissa says, I was introduced to the fairies by Susan last year. Oh, yes. Chanel says, I would love to know more about working with the fairies. Awesome. So one of the very first things I did when I got my land is I invested in bat boxes. Does anybody here know what bat boxes are? Or does anybody here work with bats? Are bats a totem animal for you? Or do you have a relationship with the bat kingdom? Let me know in the comments below. Ellen, are there fairy decks? Yes, I'm going to talk about that. That'll be the last thing I'll talk about. Rebecca says, I can go out in the desert and find a shrine place as I live in an RV park. Yeah, like there's going to be natural places that you can go. So if you don't have it in your vicinity, you can definitely find it somewhere else. But, bats are one of the ways you can work with the fairies, and bats are really, really, really misunderstood. There's this thing that you can do is you can buy or build these bat boxes and you can hang them on trees on your property, and they help kind of give bats a place to live, and it helps build up the colony. And bats get a really bad rap. They're seen as like, terrorizing or evil or mean, or we think about like rabies, or we think about vampire bats. But actually, bats are extremely helpful to our ecosystem. Marissa says, my friend has bat boxes. Tanya says, I love bats. Oh, Ellen says, you haven't done it yet. Susie says, I have a bat box. You got it for a housewarming gift. Tanya says, I live in the country and there are lots of bats. Yeah, so bats are really important to our ecosystem. And actually, they keep down infection and disease. One bat can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes in one night, which is really incredible. They tend to eat more of like the destructive pests, and they focus on mosquitoes, and they tend to eat the pests that kind of get into our vegetable gardens and the pests that eat up our corn and grains and things like that. But it's really, really incredible the amount of help that bats give our ecosystem and give us personally as beings on this planet. They're also pollinators, which most people don't know. They're just as important as bees. I kind of think of bats as like the night bees. They're just as important as bees. But the bats, where the bees kind of do like the flowers and like tomatoes and, all of the pollinating kind of vegetables and fruits on the ground level, bats actually, especially the fruit bat variety, they tend to be pollinators for the really tall trees like mango and things like that. So the bats really help us in terms of, if we were to spend that kind of money on trying to preserve our gardens and crops and things like that, they save us an estimated $4 billion a year. That's $4 billion a year that the bats are worth just in our agricultural and our ecosystem. So, of course, that also means that, if we use bats and encourage bat colonies, that we can actually reduce crop damage, which means less pesticide use, which means fewer pesticides in us, in the water, in the soil, and things like that. And in the PDF, I actually have a link that you can go to learn more about bat conservation and some other ways that besides bat boxes that you can, use to kind of help facilitate a bat colony in your area. It's very, very important. Breezy says, new concept. Well, I've been looking for bat boxes. Yeah, if you go to the link in the description of the PDF that I'll give you at the end, I believe that they do sell bat boxes, or they'll refer you out to some people that do sell them. So the next way that you can really help to make allies with the fairy kingdom is, we talked about bees. So Did you know that in a world without bees, there would be very little fruits or vegetables for us to eat? Bees are so important to the pollination and the procreation of fruits and vegetables. We would have to spend so much money and man hour and time to develop really extreme scientific strategies for us to eat. And, if we don't really focus on saving the bees right now, I really foresee in our future where, food is grown strictly in a lab. And if it's grown strictly in a lab, that's gonna cost us billions, if not trillions of dollar every single years. And that's granted if things don't go extinct before we can actually cultivate them, right? So it's already really expensive to eat fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables. But could you imagine like what an apple would cost if a human had to sit there and pollinate that? I mean, it would just add so much money and factor into our cost of food that, fruits and vegetables would become like literally only rich people could afford them without the bees, and that's just it. If they go extinct, then we don't have them, period. There might be in future generations, there might be generations where, some children grow up not knowing what a banana is, or what an apple is, or what a tomato is, if we do not do something to conserve the bees. So, there are a couple ways that you can really help the bees. And I prefer, personally, I've set up a bee garden. It's a bee and butterfly garden. In the PDF, I've actually got a link to where you can buy a pollinator garden seed kit. And it's like a mixture of seeds that you can throw out there, and you can, make your little bee garden. And what I recommend is that if you don't want to deal with bees a lot, just push it as far away from your property as you can. Put it on your very back fence, or put it in a corner away from like where you guys usually are. Bees are not very aggressive. They're not really going to attack you and that's kind of like the last thing that they want, because most bees are going to die if they sting you. It's like their last ditch effort to save themselves. So if you have a bee garden, a bee and butterfly garden out just in the corner of your backyard, or, up against the back fence, they're really not going to bother you. And you're going to attract them. You're going to give them food and water. There's also like bee boxes that you can buy. You have to check with your city about zoning. Bat boxes tend not to be a problem. Bee boxes do tend to be a problem because they are inherently a little bit of a danger, and people do have allergies to bee stings. So you're going to have to check with your county and your local laws about, setting up a bee box. But you can get them, and they basically just look like flat, rectangles, and they have like little cones in there, and then you can become actually a bee guardian, and it's not very expensive to start. It's maybe $40, and then you can actually harvest your own honey if you really wanted to, and things like that. You can actually buy a colony as well, a starter colony. So it just kind of depends on like what the regulations are around you. But typically speaking, they're really not going to bother anybody. But the bee garden is also great for the butterflies. So I think it's like over the summer, we get the monarch butterfly, and they tend to like kind of come through, and you'll just walk outside and it'll just be huge like walls of just monarch butterflies fluttering around. And they're hungry, and they're looking for the same thing that the bees are looking for. They eat the sap and things like that, the not the pollen, but the sticky stuff inside of the flowers as well. And on top of that, the bee garden will also help the birds, right? Because anywhere that there's a garden, there's typically worms, and underneath there is, like insects and worms and things like that birds like to eat. And let's say that there's some dew or anything like that on the flowers, then the birds can also drink that as well. So a bee garden is not just for bees, but you can also help the butterflies, and you can help the birds. Something I didn't bring up in here is just, the simple act of setting out a bird feeder is really, really simple, but it's something that you can do. Bird seed, I mean, you can get a whole, like, huge bag of it for maybe $6. It really doesn't cost very much. And just, once a week, go out there and refill it up, pour some more bird seed in, and that will help bring in some of the more natural like wildlife in your area. And it's really fun to watch too, you know, not just like for conservation, but that's the main thing. But, you know, just to be able to sit there and watch and participate in wildlife and give wildlife, you know, an area where they can, a sanctuary. You know, you want to think about how can you provide a sanctuary on where you live, no matter where it is that you live, right? So even if you live in an apartment, you can hang a bird feeder still outside on your deck or out, you know, you can put a bird feeder outside. You can put a couple potted plants outside, you know, for the bees or out back or something like that. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you have a big property or you have just an apartment complex, you know, you can find ways to help the bees, the birds, and the butterflies. Marissa says, I cultivate and encourage wildflowers that are favorite pollinators for my state. That's a great way to work with them too. Rebecca says, I put water trays out for the bees with stones in the tray so they don't drown. That's a great idea. Yes, I'm in the desert, but really people need to water the bees. Yes. Victoria says she's seen the bee hotels. Yeah. Robin says you can also rent bees seasonally. There you go. So if you don't want like, you know, the huge commitment, maybe you could just be a bee foster for, you know, a season. Plant milkweed. Milkweed is great for butterflies. Yes. Susan says, around the north end of my property, I have a lot of wisteria growing. Quite beautiful. I love wisteria. And it grows well. The bees love them. Yes. And on my property, I have an orchard. I have a cherry tree, I have a crabapple tree, I have a peach tree, I have a mulberry tree, and I think that's it. I think I have those 4 trees. And they're fruiting trees, and the bees just love those trees so much. And I actually don't pick up anything that falls from the tree. I actually don't pick up. I just let it go back to Mother Earth. And, you know, I let the wildlife kind of come in and they can take what they want. So my property is like very bountiful. Like the animals know to come to Christina's house because she's got the whole setup. You know what I mean? And I have animals on my property that are so comfortable with me now that I have rabbits that I'll go outside and I'll have big old fat hairs, you know, because they've been living off of my food and my gardens and things like that. And they won't even run from me. They'll just hang out. They'll look at me, you know, if I were to walk towards them and try to catch them, they'd run away. But the animals on my property know that, you know, Christina's house is the witch house on the block. That's the place to go if you need a rest or you need to get away from like predators and things like that. I also don't have any big outdoor dogs. So, you know, and I have one part of my fence is open. So like wildlife is literally just free to come on my property. And I've seen deers, raccoons, possums, birds. I've seen not hedgehogs. What are those things? Groundhogs. I've seen so many. I mean, we have lizards. We have so many different things that come on my property, and I'm totally cool with it because, you know, that's part of what I want to do as far as conserving the earth. It's really fun it's actually really fun to, you know, see the wildlife and participate in that. And it gives you like a sense of happiness, and it gives you a sense of peace that you're really not going to find any other way, if that makes sense. So another thing that you can do is you can start your own compost pile. You can start your own compost bin, and you can start a worm farm doing that. And worms are so great to help with your garden. They're food for the birds. There's many ways that worms help you. But the main way to actually start the worm garden is to begin with your own compost pile. And you may be asking, like, what is composting? So does anybody here actually compost? Is anybody familiar with that? Susan says it's great for the ecosystem to have set up like that. It makes one's heart happy for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So composting is a natural process by which organic matter is like basically fermented and is turned into fertilizer for your garden. So if you start to have a garden like every year, or you do potted plants or something like that, you go to the grocery store, you go to Walmart or Target, wherever, and you buy a bag of fertilizer, you're basically buying something that you could make for free at home, with the stuff that you've already used to buy the ingredients, basically, which is like banana peels, coffee grounds, eggshells, any type of like organic matter is what is it turns into fertilizer through composting. Marissa says, I did it in my old place. I got a lot of black ants. Yeah, so, you want to, if you're going to compost inside, you definitely have to like stay on top of it. You have to get like a really special, there's a special compost bin that you can get that has like a filter on it so that it doesn't emit any type of smell. And you'll have to get one that's like really locked down, and be sure to be taking that out quite often. But your compost pile needs to be away from your house, definitely. It needs to be like, where your bee garden is. You need to have like your compost pile pretty far in a corner away from your house, or it will attract pests. But composting, basically, it enriches soil and it provides nitrates and other nourishing chemicals that will help your plants grow big and strong. So you can use that compost and it turns into like this, it almost turns into like a really thick, kind of moist, kind of dirt, gritty type of, maybe somewhat liquidy kind of material. And I know it sounds gross, and trust me, it doesn't smell great. But fertilizer, making your own fertilizer is like literally money. It's cash money. It's so much money that you're going to save yourself. So what you can do is you can purchase a separate trash bin where all of your organic matter goes into. So like, your eggshells, your banana peels, your tomato skins, your apple skins, like anything that's like organic, as far as like it was once living, not meat, not um, like boxed processed kind of stuff that really wouldn't work. That would probably create more of a problem for you as far as like, attracting pests and things like that. What I'm talking about is like fruits and vegetables and things like that, like any leftovers that you have. And so you just kind of put it into a pile. And what I did is I just have like a little tarp outside. And then I just have like a compost pile on top of that. I put some soil down and I put some of my worms down in there, and I have a compost pile. And so what I do is I basically just take a rake, and I have this really long rake. So it's really long, so I don't have to get too close and smell it. But every once in a while, you want to take the rake and you kind of just want to rake it and kind of turn it over. And what that does is it helps it ferment further. And like I said, it kind of turns into like a mushy, kind of black, gritty substance, but it's literally just straight up plant food. It's going to really help your garden grow really big. It's going to make you have really, I use it and I get huge tomatoes. Like I'm talking tomatoes like this big because I compost, and it doesn't take much. And it's just it's one of those things where it can be an afterthought. You don't have to do it all the time, but just as long as you're trying a little bit, I mean, anything that you do is going to help the soil. And on top of that, you can compost naturally as well. So like say you have fruit trees on your property like I do. You can just let them go to the ground. And it's kind of obnoxious for a couple days when they first fall because you're going to get all of like the June bugs and things like that. Just, leave it alone for like a week or so, and then you'll find that once the June bugs get their fill and they're happy, then, everybody else, it just kind of starts kind of decaying into the ground, and then a couple weeks later there's nothing really there. And what I notice is that the grass around the trees will go really, really big really fast because it's all fertilized from all of the leftover organic material. Kimberly says, do you do anything to deter predators? In some places, bears, coyotes, mountain lions wouldn't be unheard of. I don't have any natural predators in my area, so that's not really like an issue for me personally. I have heard of electrical fences, and that could be one thing that you set up on your property, but I don't really know how like cost efficient that would be. Like it's like a perimeter, and if something passes it, beyond a certain point, beyond a certain size, it will like notify you. But to be honest with you, I don't have any natural predators in my area besides hawks. Hawks are the only things that I really have to deal with. And out front, actually, if I look out front my window, like that part just like going backwards is just pure forest. And I have hawks that are out there all the time, and eagles that are out there all the time. Further back there, there's like wolves and, some other types of animals, but they rarely ever come around this area. They have to be really desperate, and I haven't heard of any. So I might not be very much help when it comes to that. Hi Lynn, good to see you. There are small apartment-sized compost containers, yes. And in this PDF, there's going to be a link to the one that I actually recommend that you get, and it's the one that, you know, doesn't, it also prevents the scent. And when it comes to ants, what I do with ants is first you want to spray down like really soapy water around where they're coming through. I just dealt with them for like a couple of weeks. They were in my kitchen, they were in my bathroom. They don't tend to bother me that bad. I tend to leave them alone in most cases. I know most people will be like, ew, but you know, as long as you're not leaving food around, as long as you are, you know, making sure the area is wiped down, you're getting your dishes done, you're not letting your dishes, you know, sit in the sink, more or less you should be okay. It's just more of an annoyance than anything. But what I'll do is I'll do really soapy water to kind of disrupt their scent, because ants are creatures that will follow a trail. So they will, you know, if you, even if you were to kill them with like a pesticide or something like that, which I don't really recommend, it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really disrupt the scent trail that they have. One thing I've found that does disrupt the scent trail is to first spray down with like Dial soap, like just really basic like soap, and wipe it all down, get it to where it's dry, and then get yourself a spray bottle, mix some water in there with a lot of peppermint oil. And if you spray the peppermint oil like several times a day, especially in the cracks and the crevices, you shouldn't get too many. You're probably going to get a couple that come in once in a while, but I mean, they're not really, the black ants don't bite. They're not going to hurt. They're not going to hurt you. They're just more of an annoyance than anything else. Yeah, you have the hawks also. Big dogs are good to chase predators off, but the deer will keep away. Yeah, and we don't have a big dog. I used to have a big dog. She ended up passing away like 4 years ago, and I just haven't had the heart to get another one. But big dogs are definitely, you know, having a dog. I also, Loki was an inside and outside cat. Loki's my black cat. Some of you might know him. He's a troll, but he's a big boy. He is a big boy. He's like a 25-pound cat. He's huge. He looks like a big old panther. He was an indoor and outdoor cat for a really long time, and he definitely, you know, kept some of the bigger things away. But I ended up bringing him inside because he kept killing the birds and stuff like that. And I was just like, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. So I ended up bringing him inside. So right now I don't have an outside guardian. But that is one way that you can definitely, you know, but, you know, as far as like a dog, is it really going to keep away a mountain lion? I don't know. That would be kind of, you know, that would be a gamble, because mountain lions are pretty mean, or bears are pretty mean. Not good as worms. I think I need more grass clippings. You have to get the balance right. Yeah. Yeah. Victoria says, love peppermint oil. It keeps my mice awake. My cats are useless in this area. That is so funny. Yeah, cats are great guardians. You know, it's no wonder that all witches pretty much have cats. They are a natural pest repellent. I have 3 cats, and they're very good about getting the spiders, the centipedes, millipedes. They're great about getting mice. I haven't seen a mouse like ever since I've been here. Maybe I'm just lucky. But yeah, they're great. And I recommend getting a pack of cats, more than just one. I recommend getting like 3 to 4. And yeah, you know, you have to deal with litter boxes and things like that, and it kind of sucks, and you know, but just the amount of like, they are protectors. They will protect your land. And it's a natural way, it's a natural ecosystem. Cats are naturally supposed to eat pests and insects and things like that in the wild. So, you know, you're kind of, you know, fueling into that natural kind of cycle. Oh, Kimberly, yeah, you thought your cat was big at 15 pounds. Loki is a beast. I need to get him in here one day, and I'll show you guys. I'll show you guys on one of my videos in my group. Peppermint oils is good for spiders too. Yeah, very, very good for spiders, peppermint oil. And you want to, I mean, you're going to want to get like at least like this size bottle to like 1 spray bottle. You're going to want to just like dump everything into it. You need to use a lot. We have an army of strays plus raccoons. You know, I don't have a problem with raccoons. A lot of people, I've noticed a lot of people don't like raccoons because they're kind of, you know, they kind of get into things. But actually, I see raccoons around here all the time, and I really am not bothered by them. They're pretty cool creatures. Jazzy says, hi, Jazzy. Good to see you. Jazzy says, well, I might not be too popular with the fairies. I have a garden that I don't do much with. We have deer around here, many coons, and we do get a lot of different birds. My brother likes gardening, though. I do recycle. I think fairies are interesting anyway. I have a cat. I love them. Yeah. Kimberly says, cats are great for apartments. The mice stay in the neighbors' apartments, and they're right on top of any cockroaches. Yep. Kimberly says, ahem, they so are. My ninja is always letting me know stuff. Oh, yeah. Bring Loki soon so we can see him. I will. So we're talking about recycling. So let's go. You guys are so good. You kind of know where this is kind of going. So the last conservation technique that I want to share with you guys today is literally one that's so easy. Anybody should and can do it. And that is recycling. Recycling is a $40 billion per year industry that's focused on turning old used products and materials into new products and materials. And what this does is it really helps with the landfill problem. I mean, yeah, we take our trash out and then it just kind of disappears. These magical trash gnomes come and pick it up and it's just gone and we never have to see it again. But the reality is your trash goes somewhere, right? And so that somewhere is, think about every single person on the planet and think about how much trash that you produce. I know I produce at least 2 to 3 bags per week, 13-gallon bags per week of trash. That's just unavoidable because almost everything that we buy is, in disposable kind of containers and things like that. So if you can find ways to shop, like, for example, one thing I do is I use cloth bags to shop with instead of getting paper or plastic. I tend to buy in bulk as well, and I tend to put things in glass jars and things like that so that I'm not using, so much plastic. But it's another one of those things that's like so easy, and all it takes is a little bit of forethought before you throw something away. All it takes is that extra 30 seconds of thought and rinsing something out, and a little bit of knowledge about like what is recyclable, what isn't recyclable, or how you kind of deal with certain things, because not everything can be just tossed into the recycle bin, but a lot of things can be. And so whatever you can start with there. Plastic bottles, aluminum cans, cardboard, these are the things that most of us think about. How many packages we get from Amazon and how many boxes that we throw in the trash, those things can be recycled. And all you have to do is just kind of think about it, maybe read a little bit of literature. You can print out, I have a link to a really great website where you can like see different categories of things and how you actually recycle them. You can print it out, you can stick it up on your fridge with the magnet, and then you can have that. And so if you're ever curious and you have something and you're not sure how to deal with it, then you can deal with it in that way. We just saw in California where they banned the use of plastic straws, and don't be mistaken, that's going to be happening across the rest of the United States, and it's going to be happening soon. So, it's sad that we have to be kind of forced into this situation where we have to, recycle by law, and it's not just necessarily a choice anymore. But again, it's good that, the powers that be are starting to recognize this is really important, that we need to make laws around it. And that's kind of where I am with it. We'll focus on that it's becoming mainstream rather than, okay, all of this trauma and all of this, pollution and things like that we had to go through to get to this point. So I'm very much, trying to focus on the now, the present moment, the modern reason behind everything, to try to align with the future. We can't take back what we've done in the past, So we're just going to have to learn a new way of doing things, and it's really, really not that hard. Another great thing that I do, like I said, I reuse glass jars. So if I buy a glass of olives or peanut butter or something like that, I tend to keep those. Also, if you are a drinker, if you like to drink wine or beer or spritzers or anything that comes in like a glass bottle like that, you can actually save that stuff, even aluminum cans. You can save it and you can actually go turn it in for money. There are places where you can turn that stuff in and they will actually, they'll give you a couple dollars. It's not like they're going to give you a bunch of money, but they will still give you some money for that and they'll buy it back from you. Some places even have this is a can of LaCroix and trying to find it. Is it on here? I don't think it's posted on here. Maybe it's on the bottom. No, I can't figure it out where it is. But on some of the bottles, they'll actually be like 5 cents cash back if you turn it back in, or like 10 cents cash back or something like that. So it'll say on the bottle or the can sometimes like what the monetary value is if you recycle it. My cat would let a mouse walk right by her and not do a thing. I think your cats are broken. Susie says, we have squirrels. They drive me nuts. I have nicknamed my dog Must Chase Squirrels. That's so funny. That is so funny. I actually have a family of squirrels that live, so I have like a balcony that goes off my bedroom, and I have a balcony, like a deck that goes off of my kitchen. The balcony that goes off of my bedroom, I have a really big mulberry tree. I think it's a mulberry, or is it boysenberry? I can't remember. They're good. They're just little berries. I can literally step out onto my bedroom deck and I can reach up and grab like berries and eat them just straight from the tree. It's magical. But it's like actually a house for the squirrels. They love it, and they can actually get up there, and they've made a little house in my bedroom fireplace chimney and things like that. You know, okay, they might be destroying a little bit of something. There might be a little bit of a mess up there, but I can't see it. And like, for example, we just had 3 days of really bad torrential flooding here, like so bad that like my cul-de-sac was a pond. Like it was so bad. It was just flooding everywhere. And I heard them up there, I can hear them up there in the morning, like, I can hear the babies talking and things like that. And I was just glad that they had somewhere to go, because it was just like really, really bad outside, and I was worried about them, and I was feeling like really upset and that I didn't have more things. So this summer or next summer, I really want to start investing into some rabbit hutches for outside that are propped up on cinder blocks. And I want to start investing in some like little squirrel homes. I want to put them on the trees and things like that, nail them in, because I want to provide better places for them to go instead of trying to use my house to do things like that and to make a nest. Yeah, she likes to watch them from the window. Tanya says, wasp moved into my garden, so I can't get there. Oh, wasp are a different thing altogether. Wasp are mean, and they are aggressive and mean. So there was a discussion in the previous video about like, sovereignty versus like conservation. So if you are dealing with pests like wasps or hornets that are actually aggressive and evil, basically, that will attack you for no reason other than they think that you're in their territory, you do have every right to utilize whatever resources you have to get rid of those guys. And you can call people to remove nests and things like that. I do definitely believe that, I will coexist with you on my land, but the moment you turn on me, that's when you have to go. And I try to set the intention that you are a guest on my land, you are a guest on my property. And if it becomes a situation where you're hurting me or you're damaging me, then I'm sorry, you have to go. So that's kind of how I view the wasps and hornets situation. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about some of the more woo-woo ways that you can invite the fairy in. I recently bought a collapsible metal straw and keep forgetting I have it. Oh yeah, stick it in your purse. I would love to see a straw ban in Austin. Yep. I've just got a pet bunny rabbit, so I'm able to get rid of my scraps, but I can't. There you go. That's a great way. That's a great way, Chanel, to do that. Absolutely. A&W went to paper straws a few months ago. Don't people take their bottles and cans back? Sadly, most people don't, that I know. Victoria says, I'm starting to buy from eBay reuse instead of Amazon as much as I can. That's a great way to, buy secondhand. There's some really great secondhand stores around here that we can go to, and I can find absolute gems. I found like crystals, and I found, I found a juicer that was like a brand new juicer. I paid like $10 for it, and on Amazon it was like $60 or $70. So that's a great way. Buying secondhand, buying used, buying recycled is a great way to, and also patroning artists that really focus on rebuilding old furniture and things like that. It's a great way to help conserve the environment. So while the last thing I want to talk about for this, in particular, let me check my notes. You know what? Actually, we're gonna backtrack here. I want to talk about, since we're already 50 minutes in, and the rest you can kind of read in the PDF if I don't end up getting to it. I want to talk about how to identify the type of fairy that you're actually working with. So does that interest everybody? Is everybody cool with that? That if we go, to how to identify and how to actually talk to the fairies rather than talking about the fairy door and the crystals and things like that, that you can kind of read on your own time. But I didn't include this in the PDF. So in the previous video, I talked about the elementals, as far as like the fairies, and there are different types of fairies. There are fire fairies, which you're going to be dealing with a lot of fire fairies tonight since it is Beltane and everybody's going to be doing bonfires, things like that, especially if you are going to be doing a fire of your own. There are water fairies, there are air fairies, there are earth fairies. So there are different types of fairies based on the types of elements. And since I already talked about this more in depth in the other video, I'm just going to kind of blow through it so we can actually get to the good part where we can actually figure out like what kind of fairy that we're working with. Let's talk about how to identify them. Okay, so the fire fairies are like really primordial beings, and they are associated more as like, you're going to find the fire fairies more around like volcanoes, forest fires, that sort of thing. Even our own bonfires, anywhere that there's fire or an intense level of heat, you're going to find fire fairies. You're going to find them a lot today because of Beltane. We also have water fairies. These are more like sprites. They're mermaids, selkies, that sort of thing. They're the water beings. They are charged with the sacred duty of protecting our oceans, our rivers, our lakes, our ponds, our springs, that sort of thing. We also have air fairies, which are charged with the protection of of weather. So like if there's a tornado or a thunderstorm or even some sort of like hurricane or something like that, you can bet that there's some sort of involvement with the air fairies going on there. And they're also involved with like getting pollutants out of the air, protecting the ozone, that sort of thing. And then finally, we have the earth fairies, and they are associated with the plants, vegetation, the wildlife, the animal kingdom, that sort of thing. The trees, all of nature, basically. That's like it grows in the ground or it's alive, that sort of thing. And if you want a deeper dive into that, you can watch the previous video, like I said, where I talk more in depth about that. But what I didn't talk about is the hierarchy of the Fae. So you have four main types of fairies outside of the elements, okay? Now, if you are a tarot reader, you might want to listen to this and start making some connections here. I'll reveal the connections more at the end, but this is how I personally use tarot cards to talk to the fairies, in addition to the spread that I'll give you and things like that. So the first type of fairy we have are the solitary fairies, and these are typically like really young. They're juvenile fairies. They're fairies that prefer to fly solo. They tend to appear to babies. They tend to appear to small children or childlike people. They're the really, really young fae, and I don't know if you guys have ever. I saw them when I was young, and what I saw them as was. When you're in the sunlight and you see dust and it kind of like sparkles and things like that, like I was in a situation where I was seeing that, except that I was like outside and there was, it really wasn't like there was just certain light shining in one area where I could actually see them. I actually just saw it, and there were like these little twinkles, like it almost kind of like looked like dusty shining particles in the sun. And I was maybe like 6 or 7 at the time, and if you look really hard you can see these sometimes. But they're more of the more immature, mischievous kind of fairies, but in their mind it's like it's all good and fun. They're really not there to like hurt anybody, but they're more like the rebel. They really don't follow the rules. They kind of prefer to be on their own, and they tend to like to interact with humans, especially human children. I saw the garbage collects dumping the recycling bins at my field. Oh my goodness. Heard the same from my friends. Oh my gosh, that's illegal. I would report them. Tanya says, wasp followed me and my dogs into the house and stung us a lot. I have not been in my garden since. Ugh, that's no good. Pamela says, doesn't surprise me. They are finally being exposed. All the time we send sporting. And not only that, but I have to pay to recycle. It's not free. So if they're, taking my money and I'm thinking that I'm recycling, but they're just throwing that recycling stuff into the trash, I would be furious. I would be furious. The second kind of fairy are the trooping fairies. So they are fairies that tend to go around in groups, and they're kind of like a fairy army in a way. They are the protectors. They are like the little fairy army that goes around and they oversee everything and they make sure everything's going according to the plan from the queen and king, we'll talk about here in a minute. But they tend to stay in groups and they tend to actually manifest as animals. And instead, the solo fairies, the solitary fairies, don't tend to manifest as animals. They tend to just show themselves to children, or they come across as like sparkles, like a sparkle in the light. Whereas the trooping fairies, they can manifest as animals. In my backyard, I tend to see them a lot as packs of birds. I have this pack of crows that comes around all the time. I'm convinced it's a pack of fairies. I have like families of bunnies and rabbits and hares that live out there. I'm convinced that sometimes they are fairies and things like that. So they tend to take the form of animals because they want to be very covert. They're almost kind of like the little secret ninja fairies. They will manifest as wildlife on your property and they kind of just like go around and make rounds and just kind of make sure everything's going okay. They monitor things and they are kind of like the scouts of the fairy kingdom. And then we have the queens and kings, which are like the overseers of a specific district. They don't tend to like get into the field very much. We don't really ever see them. We can, however, petition to them, but you really want to be careful. You can make offerings to the queen and king, but in most cases, you're going to want to pretty much just talk to the queen only if you're brave enough to do that. Because based on lore, the fairy king tends to be feisty, tends to be known to shapeshift into a beautiful, like handsome man and seduce you and then, leave you high and dry with the baby. That's kind of like the energy of the fairy king. Again, they don't mean any harm, but the fairy kings tend to be very infatuated with human women. And it's pretty much part of the folklore that you don't really want to petition or mess with them very much. The queens tend to be more of a safer bet, in my opinion, but do understand that if you do petition the queen or king, they will judge you harshly, more harshly than any of the other fairies, and there will be a price to anything that you ask for. So nothing to the fae is free or without a cost, right? And this is why I tend to just work with the troopers and the solitaries as far as like conservation and just like passively getting the benefits of their blessings and things like that. I tend to not want to work with them like directly as far as especially like anything above like a trooper, because then things can start to get a little complicated. They can start to go a little bit, it can start to have maybe even a negative effect on you if you indenture yourself too much to them. And if you indenture yourself too much to the royalty, they start to expect that from you. And if you can't uphold that, if you can't maintain that, then they might end up taking it out on you. So, and then, things can happen like accidents or, just random bad things kind of happening. And that's because, you're not making the queen or king happy. So personally, I would just say, unless you really want to work with them and you're 100% confident and you're like one of those live in the forest, fruitarian vegans and you don't use any unnatural products and things like that, sure, you'd probably be a good ally for the fairy queen or king. But if you're just a regular person like me, I would say let's not even go there with them. That's just my opinion. So if you are a tarot reader, based on what I said, is there anything that comes to mind? Is there any connection that just seems to kind of make sense? Victoria says, I once saw a dandelion type fairy about the size of a beach ball and it was shimmering. I saw it in my headlights, but I couldn't see with the naked eye. That's really, really neat. That's really cool. I love that. So if you are a tarot reader, you might be thinking that maybe there's a connection here with the 4 elements and the 4 types of fairies, 16. So what part of tarot has 16 different cards in it? Come on, tarot readers. The court cards, right? So the court cards in tarot can be a really great way to actually connect and figure out, identify, like what kind of fairy you're talking about, or you're talking to, I should say. What about flower devas, the ones that look like a globe of light around a blossom? Those to me would be solitaries. That to me, they would be solitaries. They tend to be like more of the harmless ones. They're just kind of doing their business. They're not really bothering anybody. They get more aggressive as they get higher in rank. The troopers tend to be more aggressive. They don't want to get involved, but they will if something happens, and that's why they walk around in numbers, and you'll see like a pack of them. And then the queens and kings you'll very rarely ever see, and I don't really recommend, working with them very much. So the tarot court cards. So let's say, for example, the tarot court cards, you work with the different 4 elements. So if you were to open up your deck, just shuffle it and pull out a card, you could just see what element that you get, and that could give you some type of inclination of what kind of elemental fairy you're dealing with. But if you want to go and see what their message is for you based on the card. However, if you wanted to go deeper with that, what you could do is you could just take out your court cards by themselves, shuffle them up really good, and I associate the solitaries as the pages. I associate the troopers as the knights, and obviously the queens as the queens, and the kings as the kings. And so, for example, if you were to pull the page of wands or the page of fire, you could be interacting with a solitary fire fairy. If you pulled the page of cups, you could be interacting with the solitary water fairy. If you pulled the page of swords, it could be a solitary air fairy. If you pulled the page of earth or pentacles, you could be dealing with a solitary earth fairy. Now, let's say if you pulled the Knight of Wands or the Knight of Fire, it could be a trooping fire fairy, which means that you could be dealing with a group of fire fairies, right? And so on and so forth. So if you were to pull a king or a queen, you could be dealing with like a queen of the earth fairies, a queen of the vegetation, a queen of the animal kingdom. Or if you pull, let's say, the King of Swords, you could be dealing with a king fairy of the air realm, which is in charge of like weather and thunderstorms and the atmosphere and things like that. So that's kind of how I tend to try to identify the type of fairy that I'm working with. I have a special deck, and those of you who asked me earlier about decks that you can use, yes, they can show up as dragonflies, Tanya. Absolutely. They can show up as almost anything in the natural kingdom. So I have a special deck that I have preserved just for working with the fairy. It's this deck. It's the Fairy Tarot Cards and Guidebook by Doreen Virtue and Radley Valentine. Hopefully you can see that. And what I have done is I will shuffle it up really well. And I will just do a demonstration here. Here, let me move some things out of my way here. So I'll shuffle it up and I'll say, are there any fairies around me? And if there are any fairies around me, what kind of fairies are there? And what is their message for me? Okay. So you can't see it, but I'm shuffling. They're just really big cards. They're just kind of hard to shuffle. And I'll shuffle and I'll shuffle and I'll shuffle. And then I'll break it in half and I'll just start pulling cards. So the first card is the Five of Winter. I'll just put it down. Then I got the Hierophant. I'll just put it down. And then I got the King of Summer. Okay. So I will take the King of Summer as the middle card. I will take the next card in the deck, which is the Eight of Winter. And then I will take the card that came before it. So kind of like finding a significator in tarot when you pull and find a significator. I'll keep pulling until I find a court card, and then I'll pull the card before it and I'll pull the card after it. And this is my message from the fairies. So I have the King of Summer, which I believe is the cups in this. So King of Water. So around me is a King of Water, a King of ponds, lakes, rivers, which totally makes sense because it's been nothing but torrential downpour, flooding. I mean, my backyard is literally a pond. You know what I mean? And so then I'll read the message. So the first card is 5, which is Hierophant Unity. It says, do the right thing for the right reason. Compare traditional versus new approaches to see which works for you. A spiritual minded community. And then the next card is the 8 of Winter, which I believe is the 8 of Pentacles. And it says, you have what it takes if only if you believe in yourself. Thinking that you're powerless when you're not. A lack of self-confidence keeps you from getting what you want. So from this, the king, he's telling me that I need to focus on community with the Hierophant. I need to focus also on being more confident. And if I do those two things, he will give me a blessing. Okay? So that's how I read that. And then I also have another deck that I use, which is called The Magical Messages from the Fairies. And it's an oracle card deck. And it's also by Doreen Virtue. And these might be a little difficult to find right now simply because she's no longer selling them. Doreen doesn't want anything to do with tarot cards anymore. So what's happening is that they are releasing some of them under a new publishing name. Or you might be able to find them at like a secondhand store or something like that. Or check eBay if you can't really find them. So this is another deck that I like to use if I just want like a straight up oracular message. And I'll shuffle these. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to use Doreen Virtue decks. You just use whatever's comfortable for you. There's a lot of different fairy decks out there. If you don't vibe with Doreen Virtue, that's totally okay. You can, choose any deck that you like as long as it's fairy themed. And then I'll cut it in half, pull a card, and it says, perfect timing. This is the right time for you to move forward. So I take this to be talking about my 6-month program that I'm starting next Monday, which is all about how to help tarot readers shift into being spiritual life coaches. And I believe that that's what this is talking about. It's basically saying, now is the right time to do this. Focus on community. Focus on, believing in yourself. Focus on having the confidence that you need to move forward with this, and everything will be fine, and I will bless you with all of the abundance that you can possibly imagine. So do you guys like that? Do you guys like how that kind of works? Does anybody have any question about how to actually do the intuitive fairy reading part? Just to clarify, we can ask the Fae for individual goals as well as how to relate to the land better. I think so, but I don't think that the Fae, I would say don't ask for anything specific unless you are really, really committed and you've been doing the good things for a really long time. I would say make a commitment to, doing some of the things I talked about today through conservation. Do that for at least a year before you start getting really specific in your requests. But otherwise, they'll bless you with what they think is appropriate that you need. But I would say make a relationship, make allies with them for up to a year first before you start asking for specific things. And one thing about the fairies is that while they love money, don't expect them to give you money because fairies don't have any use for money unless that money is going to be used for other conservation efforts. Does that make sense? So don't ask for don't ask for a check for $5,000 so you can buy have a down payment for your car. They would probably not give you $5,000 for that. If you ask for $5,000 and say, look, I will take $2,500 and I will put it back into the land, or I will, start this conservation fund and things like that. I'll buy the bat boxes. I'll do the bee boxes, the bee hotels and things like that. And then the other half I want to, invest in myself. Likely you will get just enough to probably do the conservation, but it's one of those things where I wouldn't ask for money, but I would definitely ask for just general abundance, and just you think about the abundance in terms of what they're going to give you as far as natural things that are just going to, I wouldn't think about financial prosperity, but I would think about like abundant prosperity, where just things, you tend to have good luck. Maybe you win when you go gambling and things like that. They will just touch you with that natural, like, golden type of touch. Great system. Love it. Awesome. Rebecca says, "Oh yes, I'm so into using tarot for this. I like tarot for just about everything." Me too. Marissa says, "I've been doing these things for years, but I've only worked with fairies for 1 year." I think you're probably good. I would just, try to, the first couple things that you petition them, try to make it as unselfish and unpersonally motivating as possible. For the very first couple, like, specific petitions and things like that, make it more about, like, for the good of all. And that's another way to kind of win their favor, because fairies are very much like, okay, you're doing all this just to, they're, like I said, they have free will. They can decide to not work with you. So it's kind of like one of those things where your relationship with the fairies is always going to be rocky. It's always going to be somewhat of a rocky relationship. That's just the fairy realm. If you want a relationship with the higher being that's always going to be there, always have your back and be kind of like indentured to you, work with the angels. But the angels, they're great to work with. Angels are awesome. I worked with the angels for a really, really long time, but there are limits to what they can do, because it all has to be, if you believe in angels, you believe the cultural beliefs behind it, the bias behind it is that angels can only do God's will, whereas fairies, they can pretty much do whatever they want, but their relationship comes at a little, they're not like, they're just a little bit more of difficult. They're a little bit more wild, rebellious to kind of rein in and to really build up that trust. But once you have that trust built up and you ask for things sparingly and only when it's really important and you have that intention in your heart, the fairies will give that to you. The fairies will hold us accountable. That's not a bad thing. Absolutely. That's exactly how to look at it. Yeah. So we are at an hour, and oh my gosh, I've had so much fun talking to you guys. I'm going to put the link in the description box below now, and you guys can sign up with us. And within it is a link to my free group. You can come join me. There's a video in there that's an introduction. Who and what are the Fays 101. There's also a PDF that you can download with links and things to go buy the bat boxes, look into it a little bit more, or even donate to causes that do that. So even if you can't personally do it, you can donate money. That would be a good way to ask for, money, that you can use some of that money to donate. There's also 2 spreads in there. There's a spread for Beltane to help you with, if you don't have anything really to do today, and you're kind of just like a solo witch or solitary witch. There's a tarot spread or oracle spread that you can use to connect with the energy of Beltane. And also, there is a bonus spread in there about how to connect with high vibrational beings. And I think it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like 7 or 8 different card positions. And it talks like, once you identify the fairy that you're working with, you can use like oracle cards or tarot cards to continue the conversation and go a little bit deeper. So I'm going to post that now. And it's completely free. Like the ancestors. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I want to reserve just a couple moments. Does anybody have any questions? I would love it if you would share in the comments below what is one thing that you really found interesting today, and what is the one thing that you're going to take away from this training, or what did you enjoy most about it? And I'll give everybody a couple moments, and if we don't have any questions come in, then I will go ahead and leave you to your Beltane celebrations. I'm going to be doing a cookout tonight personally. I'm going to go ahead. It stopped raining. It's still overcast, but I'm going to start up the grill tonight, and we're going to do a cookout, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. I think I'm going to make some kebabs, and I'm going to make some, vegetables, foil packets, and things like that, and just have fun, just chill out, just take it easy, and just enjoy that we are halfway through spring and to the middle of almost, yeah, we are in between spring and summer. So, things are going to start picking up. The sun's going to start coming out more. The depression and the seasonal affective disorder is going to start lifting here pretty soon. I know it. And then also one more thing that I wanted to share with you guys is that if you enjoy events like this, we will be doing the Summer of Magic in June. Our theme in my group, and it's going to be the theme of gods and goddesses, honoring the old gods. Susie's going to be participating. I'll be in there. Marissa's going to be in there. Jazzy's going to be in there. A lot of the people that you see commenting today are going to be hosting this event with me. So I have more information on that in my group. My link to join my group is actually in the description. So that's the next best thing. That will be happening in June. So we want to keep the fun going. Thank you, lovely class and the wonderful fairies. Marissa says, thank you, another fantastic training. I learned how to communicate with them through cards. The tarot and fairies are different. The tarot and fairies and the elemental fairy differences. Yeah. Rebecca says the fairies are more than one type of being. They really have been all around me, but I didn't realize it. Yeah, for sure. All right. Bye, everybody. I will see you guys in the group. Don't be a stranger. Hit me up. Come join my group, and I'll see you next time. Bye.